You know that famous Leonardo da Vinci painting of the Last Supper? It is just burned into our cultural memory.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone knows it.
Right. And everyone is sitting perfectly arranged on one side of this long, pristine table, draped in these immaculate robes. The whole scene feels, I don't know, incredibly quiet, highly choreographed, and just incredibly safe.
Yeah, it looks like a museum exhibit, honestly. The framing practically commands you to just fold your hands and be silent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you strip away centuries of artistic interpretation and, actually dig into the cultural context of first century Judea and the intense theological blueprints underneath it all, that quiet, serene painting just shatters.
It really does. The reality is totally different.
Yeah, the reality of what happened in that room and how the earliest Christians took that event and practiced it in their daily lives, it was loud, it was messy, and profoundly subversive.
Subversive is the perfect word for it.
So we have this really fascinating stack of sources in front of us today for this deep dive. We're looking at everything from academic theology papers to ancient Roman correspondence and early church manuals.
It's a really diverse pile of evidence.
It really is. And our mission today is to reconstruct the original meaning of this famous meal. And I promise you, by the end of this, you will look at this ancient ritual as a vibrant story of a high-stakes marriage proposal, a chaotic Greco-Roman feast, and a total dismantling of social hierarchies.
I love that. And, to really understand how radical this meal was, we have to start with the blueprint.
Right, the foundation of it all.
Exactly. Jesus didn't just invent a new ceremony out of thin air in some upper room. This was a Passover meal.
Which was huge.
Massive. For an audience steeped in first century Judaism, you didn't need to explain Passover to them. They were living it. It was the great annual celebration of their liberation from Egyptian slavery.
But then Jesus does something unexpected, right?
Yeah, he takes two incredibly ordinary elements on that table, bread and wine, and just completely rewires their meaning.
He takes a tradition with hundreds of years of cultural weight and anchors it entirely to himself.
Really does.
And to see the mechanics of how he does this, we have to look at the bread first. The sources point us back to the book of Leviticus, specifically something called the bread of the presence, or the showbread.
Right, the bread of the presence.
And this wasn't just like a snack to go with a lamb. In the ancient Israelite sanctuary, deep inside the tabernacle, there was this golden table.
Yeah, a very specific sacred table.
Exactly. And every single Sabbath, priests would arrange 12 fresh loaves of unleavened bread on this table. Those 12 loaves represented the 12 tribes of Israel.
And the crucial mechanism here is what that bread was actually doing, because it was only eaten by the priests, and it represented an eternal covenant.
An eternal covenant. Wow.
Yeah. The bread was a physical manifestation of the fact that God was residing with his people. He was sustaining them, literally sharing a table with them.
Oh, I see.
So eating the bread was a way of participating in that ongoing face-to-face relationship.
So when Jesus takes the bread and says, "This is my body," he's invoking that perpetual sustaining presence.
Exactly. He's pulling all that Leviticus imagery right into the room.
But the wine is where the plot really thickens, I think. Because wine wasn't actually part of the original Exodus instructions.
No, it wasn't.
Right, when the Israelites fled Egypt, they were in a rush. There was literally no time to ferment grapes.
No time at all. But centuries later, by the time Jesus is sitting at this table, the tradition had evolved.
Right.
And 4 specific cups of wine were used throughout the Passover liturgy to mark different stages of redemption.
And the historical evolution of those 4 cups is so fascinating. Our sources connect the wine back to Numbers 15.
Yes, the drink offerings.
Right. In the wilderness, God commanded that whenever the Israelites offered certain animal sacrifices, they had to accompany them with drink offerings of wine. The wine was literally poured out on the altar alongside the sacrifice.
It was. So by the 1st century, every time they raised a cup of wine at a religious festival, it carried a really deep sacrificial undertone.
It meant a life poured out.
Exactly, a life poured out.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Think about how all this layered meaning culminates in that room. And to really grasp what Jesus is doing when he lifts that cup, I want to use an analogy based on ancient Jewish marriage customs.
Oh, this is a great connection.
Really reframe this for me. In the ancient world, a marriage wasn't just 2 people falling in love. It was a serious covenant.
A very serious legal and social contract.
Right. When a young man wanted to marry, he and his father would go to the prospective bride's house, and they would negotiate what was called a bride price.
Which was usually very expensive.
Yes, a steep, often life-altering costs the father required to part with his valuable daughter.
It was a transaction designed to prove the groom's commitment, and secure the bride's value.
And once that immense price was agreed upon, the young man's father would pour a cup of wine and hand it to his son. The son would turn to the woman, hold out the cup, and essentially offer her his life.
The cup itself was the proposal.
Yes, the cup was the proposal. He was saying, I love you, I am paying the price for you, and I offer you my life. Will you marry me?
And then it was up to her.
Exactly. If she drank from the cup, the engagement was legally sealed, she accepted his life and gave him hers. If she pushed the cup away, the deal was off.
The mapping of that cultural practice onto the Last Supper is just stunning.
Isn't it?
Because during the Passover meal, they reached the third cup, which was traditionally called the cup of salvation. And Jesus lifts it, offers it to his disciples, and says, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood."
He is proposing.
He really is.
He is putting the cup on the table and saying, I am paying the ultimate bride price with my own life. Will you marry me?
And notice the agency involved there. Drinking that cup wasn't just some passive religious observance.
Right.
It was a mutual agreement. When the disciples took the cup and drank, they were sealing a new covenant.
Wow.
It was a spiritual marriage between God and his people, purchased at the highest possible cost.
It is intensely romantic, but honestly, incredibly heavy when you realize the actual blood that was about to be spilled to pay that price.
Oh, incredibly heavy.
Yet for all the beautiful sacrificial symbolism of the bread and the wine we just talked about, the actual behavior of the human beings sitting around that table was a masterclass in dysfunction.
It was a total mess.
The Da Vinci painting really hides the chaos. Just days before this dinner, the sources remind us, Mary poured out a year's wage worth of perfume on Jesus' feet.
And Judas was furious about that.
Right. He claimed it should have been sold for the poor. But the text notes he was actually skimming from the communal money bag.
Yeah, he was a thief. And the tension from that event bleeds right into the Passover room.
It has to, right?
Absolutely. By the time they sit down to eat, Satan has entered Judas. The betrayal for 30 pieces of silver is already in motion.
So you have a literal traitor breaking bread at the same table as the Messiah.
And the other disciples aren't doing much better, honestly.
No, they are not. Jesus has just told them he is about to suffer terribly. And what is their immediate reaction?
They start arguing over which one of them is the greatest.
They are having a petty turf war over status while their leader is preparing to die. It's crazy.
It is a staggering failure to read the room, just staggering.
Unbelievable.
But, their argument over status actually makes sense when you understand the mechanics of their society.
Right, because first century Judea was a strict honor and shame culture.
Exactly. Every single interaction, especially a formal meal, was governed by hierarchy. Where you sat, who you ate with, and who served you dictated your entire social worth.
And this was Passover. This was their Independence Day.
Yes, free people in the Roman world reclined to eat. They leaned on their left elbows on cushions around a low table. This reclining posture was a celebration of their liberation and their status as free men.
So they're actively performing their status. They're reclining like kings, bickering over who is the most important.
And right in the middle of this absurd argument, Jesus does something that just shatters the hierarchy.
He takes off his outer garments, wraps a servant's towel around his waist, gets down on the filthy floor, and starts washing their feet.
And to understand the shockwave this sent through the room, you have to realize that foot washing was not just a polite gesture.
No, the roads were covered in dirt and animal waste.
Right. Washing feet was considered so degrading that Jewish law often exempted Jewish slaves from having to do it. It was reserved for Gentile slaves, literally the lowest rung of the household ladder.
Wow.
Furthermore, there's a priestly echo here. In the ancient temple, priests had to be washed with water from the bronze laver before they could even approach God.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Peter famously has a visceral, almost violent reaction to this. He pulls his feet away and says, "Not my feet. You shall never wash my feet."
He is deeply offended.
Right. Is Peter's strong reaction just him being his usual stubborn self, or is it because Jesus' action is culturally offensive to him?
It's the culture. Jesus' action is culturally repulsive to him. In an honor and shame society, the master doing the work of the lowest slave upends the natural order of their entire universe.
Breaks all the rules.
It does. Jesus isn't just making a point about being nice. He is explicitly confronting and flipping the Gentile concept of power.
How so?
Well, he tells them that the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship from the top down. They dominate the people below them. but Jesus establishes a new commandment through his action.
Right. Divine power operates from the bottom up.
Exactly. In this new kingdom, to lead is to serve.
He dismantles their entire understanding of authority. He physically acts out what radical love looks like and tells them to mimic it.
It's a profound moment.
And this physical action, this pouring out of his life in service and ultimate sacrifice, leads us directly into one of the most intense scholarly debates surrounding this meal.
Oh, the debate over Luke. Yes.
Right. How did the gospel writers, particularly Luke, actually interpret the meaning of Jesus' death?
This is where the academic theology papers intersect get really interesting.
They really do.
Because there is a prominent camp of critical scholarship that argues the Gospel of Luke minimizes or completely erases the idea that Jesus' death was an atonement for sin.
Right. They argue that Luke paints Jesus merely as a tragic martyr.
Yeah.
An innocent prophet who was unjustly killed by a corrupt system.
Yes. In their view, Luke believes salvation comes only through Jesus' resurrection and exaltation, but the cross itself doesn't actually pay for any sins.
And that view dominates a lot of critical circles today.
It really does. But the sources we are looking at dismantle that argument entirely. And the hinge of their counter-argument is the Last Supper narrative itself.
The narrative we've been talking about.
Exactly. Because in Luke chapter 22, Jesus doesn't just predict his death as a tragic inevitability, he interprets the mechanism of his death.
He says his body is given for you, and his blood institutes the new covenant.
Yes, for you. And to fully grasp the weight of that, we have to look at the mechanics of what he's referencing. He's pointing straight back to Exodus 24.
Oh, okay.
Luke is using what scholars call a typological connection.
Basically, a literary echo where an ancient blueprint maps perfectly onto a new event.
Exactly. In Exodus 24, Moses seals God's covenant with Israel by taking the blood of the covenant and sprinkling it on the altar and on the people.
And that blood makes atonement.
It purifies them so they can operate as a kingdom of priests. Luke is deliberately echoing that specific moment to show that Jesus is presenting his impending death as the ultimate sacrifice that atones for the sins of the people.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
If this Last Supper atonement idea, this blood sacrifice, is the absolute core of Luke's theology, why do these critical scholars argue he drops it?
That's a fair question.
Right. If it's the central pillar, shouldn't it be loudly proclaimed on every single page of his gospel and in the book of Acts?
That is the exact question driving the debate. But the evidence suggests Luke doesn't drop it at all. He actually weaves it into this brilliant, overarching detective story.
So it's hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. Take the climax of Luke's gospel, which is the road to Emmaus.
Oh, I love that story.
It's one of the most cinematic scenes in the Bible. Two disciples are walking away from Jerusalem, utterly devastated. Jesus has been crucified, and their hope is completely dead.
And then Jesus starts walking alongside them.
Right, but the text says their eyes are miraculously prevented from recognizing him.
He walks with them for miles, explaining all the ancient scriptures, showing them exactly why the Messiah had to suffer and die. And they still don't get it.
They are completely blind to the theological reality. So how does Luke finally resolve the tension?
When do their eyes open?
Exactly. It is not during the incredibly detailed Bible study on the road. They finally see the truth when they sit down for a meal. Jesus takes the bread, blesses it, breaks it, and gives it to them. The text says it was in the breaking of the bread that their eyes were opened and they recognized him.
It's a massive callback. Luke is pointing the reader straight back to the Last Supper.
Yes. The disciples finally understand the necessity of the cross, not through a lecture, but when they are viscerally reminded of the body broken for them.
That's amazing. And he carries this into Acts too.
He carries this exact same theological thread into his second volume, the book of Acts. In Acts 20, Paul is giving a deeply emotional farewell speech to the church elders in Ephesus.
Okay.
And the literary structure of Paul's speech perfectly parallels Jesus' farewell speech at the Last Supper. The climax of Paul's instruction is an explicit reminder to shepherd the church of God, which God acquired through his own blood.
Through his own blood.
Right, the blood of the covenant didn't vanish from Luke's theology. It became the foundational reality of the entire early church.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most surprising part of our deep dive today.
Oh, this is the best part.
It is. Knowing that this meal represented a profound blood sacrifice, a beautiful marriage proposal, and a radical call to servant leadership, how did those first-century Christians actually practice it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because when you look at the historical data, it looks absolutely nothing like the quiet, solemn moments most modern churches observe today with, a tiny cracker and a thimble of grape juice.
It was radically different. The early Lord's Supper wasn't a synchronized ritual tacked onto the end of a service.
No.
It was a full, robust, chaotic, communal meal. They called it the agape, or the love feast.
And to understand the mechanics of the love feast, we have to look at the cultural architecture of the Greco-Roman world.
Right, the social setting.
In the ancient Mediterranean, the primary way people socialized was through formal banquets. And these banquets had two distinct phases. First was the deepen, which was the actual eating of the meal to satisfy hunger.
Just getting full.
Right. And second was the symposium, which was a prolonged period of drinking, extended conversation, philosophical debate, and entertainment.
And the early Christians essentially hijacked this cultural format.
They adopted the structure of the banquet, but infused it with explosive new meaning.
Yes. They viewed their meals as a foretaste of the messianic banquet prophesied in Isaiah 25.
Which is described as a...
Pliny's report is vital because it proves they weren't engaging in bizarre cultic rituals or, cannibalism, which were very common rumors at the time.
Right. Eating the body and drinking the blood sounded terrifying to outsiders.
It really did. But they were just eating a hearty, regular meal together as a family. We see this reinforced in the Didache, too.
Which is a fascinating early church manual from the late 1st century.
Exactly. It gives explicit instructions for the Eucharist, and it literally says, after you are satisfied with food, thus give thanks.
After you are satisfied.
Yeah. The ritual blessing of the bread and wine was embedded right in the middle of getting completely full on a shared meal.
But this structure created a massive problem, which brings us to the Apostle Paul.
Oh, the Corinthians.
Yes. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul writes a blistering rebuke to the church in Corinth about how they are conducting the Lord's Supper.
He was not happy.
Now, for the longest time, I assumed Paul was angry because they were eating a full meal instead of treating the moment with quiet reverence.
That is a very common assumption.
So what does this all mean? Was Paul trying to stop them from eating a real meal and tell them to be quiet?
No, the text reveals something much more insidious. Paul wasn't angry about the presence of food at all. He was furious about the social division that the food was causing.
Oh, right. Because to understand why this division happened, you have to look at the economic makeup of these early house churches.
You had incredibly wealthy patrons worshiping alongside impoverished day laborers and slaves.
And the wealthy members controlled their own schedules. They didn't have to work late, so they were arriving at the house early for the agape feast.
They were eating all the best food and getting drunk before the poor even arrived.
Wow.
Yeah. By the time the working class members showed up exhausted and hungry, there was nothing left.
The meal that was supposed to represent their absolute unity and equality in Christ had mutated into a display of Roman social hierarchy.
The rich were being served and the poor were being shamed.
That entirely destroys the entire point of the foot washing.
Precisely. This is why Paul tells them that whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup in an unworthy manner will be guilty concerning the body and blood of the Lord.
It's about how they treat each other.
Yes. When Paul says they are eating and drinking without discerning the body, he isn't talking about the later theological debates over transubstantiation, the doctrine that the bread physically alters its substance.
Right.
He means they are completely failing to recognize the body of believers. They are ignoring the humanity and value of their impoverished brothers and sisters.
His solution to their terrible behavior proves this, doesn't it? He doesn't say, stop eating meals, replace it with a crumb, and sit in silence.
No, his actual instruction is in verse 33. He says, when you come together to eat, wait for one another.
Wait for one another. Share the food. Make sure the slave gets to eat as much as the patron.
Exactly. The meal was designed to be the ultimate socioeconomic equalizer.
It was a meal that forced the powerful to serve the weak, perfectly mirroring Jesus with the towel.
It really was. And as a quick aside on how we often obsess over the wrong details, consider the bread itself.
What about the bread?
Well, for centuries, the church has engaged in massive, sometimes violent theological arguments over whether communion bread must be strictly unleavened, mirroring the original Passover.
Oh, that's it.
But historical evidence suggests that this intense debate over leavened versus unleavened bread didn't even reach its climax until the 9th century.
Wait, really? The 9th century?
Yeah. For the first several hundred years, the early Christians likely just used ordinary, everyday, leavened bread that members brought from their own kitchens to share.
It is astonishing how easily we fixate on procedural minutiae, like the exact recipe of the bread, while completely abandoning the radical heart of the practice.
It is a real cautionary tale. Over the centuries, as the church grew, it moved out of intimate house gatherings and into massive assembly halls.
Right, the dynamics changed.
The logistics of feeding hundreds of people became too difficult. So the Eucharist, the specific Thanksgiving ritual of the bread and wine, was separated from the evening agape meal.
And the ritual became a highly solemn, highly individualized morning observance led by clergy.
And the loud, joyous, barrier-breaking evening feast eventually just faded into history.
So let's pull all of these threads together. The Last Supper and the world-changing tradition it birthed was this brilliant, multi-layered tapestry.
It really was.
It began as a celebration of Passover liberation, where the bread of the presence signified God dwelling with us.
Right?
It was a stunning moment where Jesus offered a spiritual marriage proposal with the cup of the new covenant, paying the ultimate bride price with his own blood.
And a profoundly uncomfortable, culturally subversive demonstration of servant leadership with the washing of dirty feet.
Yes, and for the early church, it wasn't a somber, silent moment of individual introspection. It was a full, joyous, socio-economic barrier-breaking feast.
It was designed to visually proclaim to the watching Roman world that in this new family there is no rich or poor, master or slave.
And to you listening, the reason this deep dive into historical context matters is because it forcefully challenges how we view and participate in our own religious traditions today.
It really does. When we understand the mechanisms of the agape feast, it forces us to ask hard questions.
Like what?
Are our current traditions characterized by the profound gratitude, the overflowing joy, and the radical, messy inclusivity that those early Christians bled for?
When the outside world looks at the tables we set, do they see a community that waits for one another?
That is the perfect standard to measure ourselves against.
It really is.
Yes.
And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day.
Go for it.
If the original Lord's Supper was purposefully designed as a filling communal feast, a meal that explicitly forced the wealthy elite and the impoverished laborers to sit shoulder to shoulder at the exact same table and share their food equally, what would happen if modern communities returned to that blueprint?
Oh, that's a disruptive thought.
What if they replaced their highly individualized, perfectly quiet, safe rituals with a messy, noisy, fully catered potluck, where true equality was demanded? Would that chaotic dinner party actually be closer to Jesus' original intention?
I think it just might be.
The next time you see that pristine Da Vinci painting, I hope you look at that quiet, orderly table and imagine it replaced by the beautiful, unified, subversive chaos of the love feast. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.